Well, at this time, I'd like to ask Jim's friend and former colleague from Chapman University, Professor Myron Yeager, to please come and share with us. Professor Yeager?
In her email report sharing the news of Jim's death, Lori wrote, "Jim was a philosopher, first and always. That was his destiny, and he tried very hard to find his way early on. But eventually, he had to succumb to his true self, which led him down the path of so many journeys and discoveries. We're here today to celebrate and share those journeys and discoveries, at least as they relate to our knowledge, respect, and love of Jim, and Lori, and the family." I suspect all of us can readily agree with Lori when she says that Jim was a philosopher first and always. His teaching, his publishing, his reading, his conversation, his habit of living all characterize the life of the philosopher, someone whom Jim himself struggled to define as one who learns to ask and to research questions until a meaningful answer appears. Or, as Jim explains in his invitation, that section that other less adventuresome writers might have defined as a preface, in The Wisdom Seekers, Jim said, "This book has been written from the perspective of a pearl diver. Some philosophers like to argue, like to analyze ideas or language. Still others want to outline the universe as it exists or should exist. And some few dedicate themselves to saving the world or trying to move masses. But a pearl diver seeks a special treasure in the form of a wisdom that comes from careful and honest thinking, well-founded facts, valid inferences, and clear understandings. Along the way, he too may enjoy arguing, criticizing, and judging, but in the end, what he seeks is a pearl of greater price. Under and behind and through a philosopher's ponderings, one can always sense a questioning spirit that, after the analyses and dialectics are over and done with, would be happy to settle for a few pearls." Jim's life was philosophy. He was that pearl diver, always looking for that greater gem. And yes, the pun is intended. In The Wisdom Seekers, Jim summarized philosophy as critical thinking about thinking. Others have already spoken, with more authority than I can, about his decades of teaching and in the classroom. We've already heard that his approach was to challenge the students into critical thinking and thinking about thinking. And this approach, though, would not leave those students fragmented and alienated. He led them to what we've heard was a synoptic vision, a vision of the world in which questioning leads to a comprehensive view of the human experience. Such an approach took him through the process of thought, the lives of those who shaped that thought, and the works that immortalize those thoughts. We've heard about that in the books that he has written. Philosophy and Introduction to the Art of Wondering are again the Wisdom Seekers. As a pearl diver, Jim shared the wealth of his discovery with his students and other professors, seeking to challenge them to question thought, and its consequence. I met Jim through Lori. She was my student, my first year teaching at Chapman University some 29 years ago. I recognized Lori as an unusual student from our first class together, a world literature survey in which she used as an illustration for her class presentation on Franz Kafka's Metamorphosis, an organic visual aid. This was before Reza or PowerPoint. She brought to class a dead cockroach. In the years to follow, she brought me into her life, Sarah, her brothers, their families, and of course Jim. I remember meeting Jim at his home then in Santa Ana. Before I was introduced to him, I was appropriately introduced to his library. I recall vividly thinking when I saw the book-filled living room that this is a man whose mind must be rich and deep. Over the years, at meals with the two of them, at events with them, in conversations, at surprise meetings, and I am convinced everyone in Central Orange County meets at one time or another at Benji's Deli. Jim's mind was continuing to fill me with awe and wonder. Not a philosopher, I'm a student of literature. I've perhaps always struggled to understand the philosopher's mind, and Jim fed that wonder. His mind traveled broadly, referring to works we had both read, reminding me of books I should have read, and alluding to works obscure to me to illustrate or to challenge thoughts in those casual conversations. 10 minutes with Jim was to prove Francis Bacon's dictum, reading maketh a full man, conference a ready man, writing an exact man. Jim and I love to talk books, not just their merits, but the richness they brought to our experience, their use as lenses through which we might see others and ourselves better. Our last conversation, when Jim was struggling with his final illness at Town and Country, was a conversation on books. When I went into his room, he was reading. Then he told me that not only did he read as he could, but Laurie continued to read to him daily, which brought tears to his eyes, perhaps because of the love behind the action, perhaps because of the opportunity to continue to read through his weakness, and perhaps because of the opportunity it gave him to continue to discover with her new pearls or to revisit treasured ones with the one he loved. As I recall, he said that among the works they had been reading together at that time had been the works of the Romantic poets. He seemed even to apologize to me for the novel most immediately on his bedside table, a current bestseller. In reality, I was struck by the stack of books left there and his passion to engage his mind in the process of discovery in his clearly weakened physical condition. Even then, even there, he was diving for pearls. Jim loved a quotation from Joseph Campbell. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. In the preface to an introduction to the art of wondering, Jim writes, while my wife Laurie and I were lunching at a restaurant one day, she said to me, how can you not feel alive if you are creating? In creation, Jim found the path to his exploration of the mystery of life, the means to find the questions to ask, if not the answers. Beside him on that path, sharing the adventure, and sometimes triggering it, Laurie was his partner, encouraging him to explore and to dive those new pearl diving waters. Jim readily acknowledged the inspiration Laurie offered him in his writing, thinking, and most importantly, living. Any conversation with him would include, in that peaceful voice of his, an expression of the joy and warmth Laurie brought to his life on a daily basis. As he wrote in his dedication for Volume 1 of the Wisdom Seekers, Laurie, quoting Jim, said to me each morning at breakfast, go and write us a big book. He continued, my everlasting thanks for support and for love, intellect, and sparkling smiles. In the margin of my copy, he penned, not smiles, similes, damn copy editors. But I think in reality, Jim appreciated both Laurie's smiles and her similes, her spirit and her creative mind that could see Kafka in a dead cockroach. If knowledge, study, and wisdom were pearls, no doubt Laurie was his diamond. And while I only know his family indirectly, I know that they offered for him that same stimulation, pride, and emotional fulfillment that comes from the jewel of family. Jim quotes Socrates in Plato's Meno as saying, "I'm not sure of everything I say. However, there was one thing I would fight for in both word and deed, right to the end, if I could. The belief that it is possible to find out what we don't know, and that we will be better human beings, braver and more fulfilled, if we try with all our might to do so." Such is the legacy I have of Jim Christian, the one he leaves to us. He found those pearls and shared them selflessly with each of us as he sought to find out what he and we don't know. Quoting his friend Ray Bradbury, Jim wrote, "Philosophy must try, as best it can, to turn the sparrows to flights of angels, which Shakespeare wrote, sing us to our rest."
Thank you so very much, Professor Yeager. What a beautiful, beautiful homage that is to the wonderful mind of Dr. Jim Christian.